video, we talked a lot about armature, and I'm sure that if you've been playing with this over the last 10 days at all, you pretty much figured out how to put together an armature to make a little creature, and I'm always tweaking mine until they get to the point where I think that's the position I want these in. And then I will always keep one and mark it so that next time I go back to make that animal, I will make sure that I have the correct skeleton. So I won't use these at all. I will just keep these in my box until I have to make some more armatures. So the funny thing for me is that no matter what kind of armature I make, if I make exactly the same armature every time, each creature still is a one of a kind. It looks different from the one I did before. Even if I'm using the same armature, it depends on how I'm putting the cotton on. So here's one of the first ones that I made, which is a little squirrel, and his problem is that he won't stand up, which is okay because this squirrel will probably be hanging from something. This one here, finally got a couple of these painted. This little one here, I think this one is so cute. I really like it. It's very primitive. It's got a lot of little lines and muscles and lumps in it, but that's the way I like it. This one was painted with some watercolor. I think it's really, really cute, and I like the position of this one. But then my last one that I did, I think I tweaked the armature to be exactly the way I wanted it, and I ended up with a squirrel that looks like this. Sits up really nicely, and this little squirrel can be used in a number of different ways once I get it painted. Another ones were the chipmunks. The chipmunks, the first armature I made for a chipmunk is right here, and this is a little rough, and this is definitely a primitive little chipmunk. But the next one I made, I tweaked my armature a bit, and I got a fatter chipmunk, I think. Not painted yet, so we'll see how that turns out. But that's what we're going to do today. Now here you see another set of armature, which are bears that I'm making. I've been working on the different shapes for the armatures. So I want some bears that just graduate down in size. Mama bear, Papa bear, baby bear, and Goldilocks bear. But even when you put the flesh on them, they all look different because these are all made from the same armature, and yet they all look a little bit different. So we've got this bear, which actually I think I like the best. And this bear, which still needs a leg. And another bear, which for a long time just looked like a pig. But I think once it's painted, it will look like a bear. So you can see that even if you have your armature down perfectly, you're still going to get quite a variation in shapes and personalities here. But that's okay because this makes them all one of a kind. They're absolutely going to all look completely different. Next come the rabbits. All of these little rabbits were used, I used the same armature, just about identical, and yet each rabbit has a little bit different stance. That one won't sit up by itself. This one won't sit up by itself, but that's okay. I can figure something out to make it work. They're a little chubbier than I wanted. This one, though, is just perfect. In fact, this is actually my favorite little rabbit, and it just depends on how you wrap the cotton. And I was wrong about it being, you know, a super easy thing to do, because it does have its complications. Getting things to lay nice and smooth, because even if you put them on nice smoothly, you're going to end up with little crevices and wrinkles and bumps, which I think is kind of cool. It does cause a problem, though, when you're trying to paint. It's a little bit difficult painting this if the surface is lumpy and bumpy. And that's what I'm doing today. I'm going to get down and paint a bunch of these. And I'm using a couple things. I'm using some watercolors here. I hardly ever use these watercolors, so it's good to put them to use. This is a little cute little portable set of watercolors that I got many years ago. And I've just been using them for the first time, just about the first time today. I'm also using some acrylics. This is white because the white watercolor just doesn't really show up. And so a lot of acrylic paints. What you're going to do with the acrylic paint is you can really water that down with either water, or you can use your cornstarch mixture to water that down with. The watercolor, I'm simply using water to water down, and that's been my favorite thing to use so far. I really do like the way it has a little bit of a transparent look to it. Makes it look a little older, and that's what I'm going for. Over here I've got some antique rabbits just to help out a little bit. Kind of an inspiration, actually. This is a candy container. A very simple rabbit. I thought these were helpful in putting the rabbits in certain standing positions or not. And also to see how subtly that these were painted. I believe this one is made of some kind of cardboard, molded cardboard. And here's another cute little inspiration here, which is an antique. I mean, not an antique, an artist made this. Another candy container. But cute ideas for clothing and painting styles here. There's nothing complicated about the painting. If you're already an artist, you don't need any instruction. All you really need is something to look at. You need a photograph to see the proper colors and the shades of fur and the landmarks on the fur, such as the little chipmunk stripes. So really, all you need is a good book, or maybe get online and find some wildlife pictures or whatever the animal is that you're doing, and then sort of follow the pattern. These are, like I said, very old-fashioned little toys. They don't have to be painted perfectly. In fact, when they're painted imperfectly, I think they're even sweeter. So you can see that this little squirrel that I very much like is painted very simply. I've just used some beautiful burnt sienna paint here. This was all watercolor. The eyes can be put in with beads, or you can paint the eyes on with a little black dot, whatever you wish. But I really like this one. It's very, very sweet and simple. I just think this is exactly the look I was going for. A primitive little toy for my needle felting characters. And I like this one quite a bit. So I guess what we could do in this video is paint either a little chipmunk or a little squirrel. Let's go for this fat little chipmunk. First thing I did on two squirrels and a chipmunk is I put a yellow wash. My color that I'm using here is an ochre yellow, but you could probably use any kind of a golden yellow or anything like that. This is watercolor once again. As I said before, you can use an acrylic paint, which you can either use it heavily so that it's opaque, or you can really water it down with water or the cornstarch mixture and paint with that to get your first base coat. And I'm just putting a little base coat on here, and then I'm starting to put a couple layers of different colors on the squirrels and the chipmunks, just to give them several different tones in their fur. But you don't have to do this. You can just put on one color and be done with it. So here we have I'm going to do one more light coat. And by the way, Viola, the puppy, is laying in this room again, and she is snoring. And I've had complaints about that. I've actually had people complaining about that. I don't know why. But that's just the way it is, I guess. So you can actually do a little bit of painting, and every once in a while you might want to dip your brush into your cornstarch. because when you start getting this cotton wet again, it might have a tendency in some places to start lifting up, and you don't want that to happen. So this will just keep it pasted down. I'm just going to be adding a few little shadows here and there, just for fun. This, once again, is, I'm using yellow ochre, watercolor out of a tube. And I'm also going to go ahead and dip one of my paintbrushes into the cornstarch after I've got that down. And just put a light coat of the cornstarch on that to sort of blend that in a little better, because the watercolor does soak into that cotton. That's really what I like about it. I don't want the paint to be sitting on top of the surface. I like for it to just blend in to the cotton and give it that really nice translucent and transparent look. Now I think I'm going to make, I kind of like the little orange colored chipmunks, so I'm going to let this dry for a few minutes, and then I'm going to use some burnt sienna, which is kind of a orangish brown. You can see that on this little squirrel I have added that burnt sienna, and I'm letting this little squirrel dry. I'm really partial to the little red squirrels, so I'll probably make this a red squirrel, but I will make this more like a grayish brown squirrel. I still want those highlights underneath, however. And with the chipmunk, I think we're going to go for another little orangish chipmunk. If you've got 3 pieces that you can work on together, that's very helpful, because you can let them dry in between. This isn't like they have to dry for very long, because you're just putting on little bits of paint. The antique pieces that I've seen really are, that I've seen in photographs and images, really do have this very fine color on top of them. They're not usually opaque, and so I'm really taking it pretty easy on the paint here. You can also paint clothes on them if you want to. You can paint a little vest. I haven't done that yet, done anything like that. So I'm just barely touching it. You don't need expensive brushes. When I'm working on an illustration on watercolor paper, I do use pretty nice quality brushes. But for this work, you really don't need anything too expensive. I went to Hobby Lobby and I found, I think it was 12. It was 12 of these excellent brushes right here. Royal Langnickel. They were very inexpensive. I think they were around $12. So it's $1 a brush. And they come in all kinds of different sizes. So you get a variety of brushes for a very small amount of money. This is kind of splotchy. So I'm going to get my cornstarch and move it around a bit, blend it in. So what I'm doing is just layering the paint and trying to get in a few little details here and there. And the last thing I will do is I will mark the little nose and the mouth with a very fine-tipped pen. Or a paintbrush. Paintbrush will work. Actually, I think I will use this paintbrush. The paintbrush works a lot better for making lines than a pen. And then when this is completely dry, I will add the little stripes. Start underneath. Yep. Right underneath the arm. Okay, I think this little chipmunk, I'll let the black stripes dry. I'm going to put a tiny little nose on this cute little chipmunk. You can see that his face is a little bit crooked and all, but he is a little primitive. So give him a little nose. Hope that's showing up on the camera and it's not out of focus. And a little mouth. There. We've managed to get a cute little chipmunk here by painting it in different layers, just like I would do if I were doing a watercolor painting, sort of, and getting little different shades here and there in the fur. But it's really a pretty straightforward and simple process, as you can see. This one here looks like it's a lot more opaque in the color, and that's because I use several layers of watered down acrylic on this one. So this is how the little brown squirrel turned out. I think he's pretty cute. And many people ask me if this was very much like needle felting, and it's not. It's not at all like needle felting. The only thing this has in common with needle felting is that in needle felting you want to use an armature, and you're also going to wind your material around your armature. Other than that, there's nothing at all comparable to needle felting. And the look is completely different. This little fox is really pretty primitive, and he's the one that's made of the spun cotton. So if you were to compare a little spun cotton fox, such as this one, with a needle felted fox, such as this one, it's a completely different look. And I'm not going to say that spun cotton is fast, because in some instances, if you're making something really small, yeah, you can do it pretty quickly. But if you're wrapping legs and you're doing all kinds of different limbs and lots of ears and tails and that sort of thing, it does take a while, because you have to dry it in between each gluing session. So it's time consuming, but not as time consuming as needle felting by any means. I managed to finish painting a few of these, and not that many, probably half a dozen, maybe a dozen of them. I still have a long way to go. I don't know about the rest of you, but it was so cold here last week, and we had a lot of things that we had to do with the plumbing and all that sort of thing. So I really didn't have a chance to get everybody finished. But it was fun. I've got a lot of cute little toys here, and I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of them next week. I had planned on planting some of my discount flower bulbs in pots this week and as part of the video. Unfortunately, even the soil in my pots was frozen. That's how cold it was here in East Tennessee. So we'll have to do it next time. Hopefully the temperatures will go up for all of us. And in the meantime, thank you for joining me here in Hopalong Hollow, and I hope you'll get out your paint boxes and get busy painting your little creatures.